Are you in Montenegro?
I am in Montenegro and we are live. I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, the whole
Mhm.
original holistic pet health coach, coming to you from Montenegro. If you know where that is, you win the geography prize today. And with me today is the very charming Dr. Rob Silver, who is really one of the OG vets when it comes to integrative medicine and functional medicine. I think you were way in that before most of us.
Well,
For those of you that
as were
I
you,
think
Ruth. As were you. Yes, absolutely. Hmm.
yeah, no, I mean, you inspired me from the stage at NAVC to look into functional
Really?
medicine.
Wow.
So yeah,
Cool.
yeah. For those of you that don't know Dr. Silver, he is indeed a pioneer and was a graduate of Colorado State University's College of Veterinary Medicine, established one of the very first integrative veterinary hospitals in the United States. Dr. Silver is a recognized expert in veterinary cannabis and medicinal mushrooms and has authored two influential books, Medical Marijuana for Your and Your Pet, and most recently, There's a Mushroom for That,
What a beautiful.
which is an amazing book. If you have not gotten this, you need to go check it out because it is a dearth of information. I'm super happy to have an autographed copy, which is, there we go. So thank you, my friend. Uh,
My pleasure.
but he is currently serving with as an adjunct professor at Chi University and Lincoln Memorial University College of Veterinary Medicine, and is the chief veterinary officer at Real Mushrooms, all while running the Well Pet Dispensary blog site. So, welcome, Doc.
Thank
And
you.
we were talking earlier, you were running around like a one-arm paper wallpaper hanger. I mean, what you're doing and keeping up with is just astonishing. So
Thank you.
t before we jump into some of these questions, I know that when you birthed this book, you
Mm.
you had some specific intentions in mind. So if you can tell us a little bit about that, that would be amazing.
Well, the book initially got started as a kind of an update of my book on cannabis at about the same time that mushrooms became very, very popular. And that's when I kind of shifted streams. The book, although it's titled by There's a Mushroom for That, actually has an awful lot of information in it about the use of CBD and cannabis, which I think the two of them actually work together even better than either one of them alone. But I really, after years of practice and I loved practice, but there came a time when I had to leave practice to do the other work, which is to reach a wider audience. I wanted to create a book that would be helpful to the pet parent, that could help guide them through either just creating optimal health in their pet, or if their pet had a certain problems, certain chronic diseases that are very common to pets, and that they would be able to read through a chapter on that topic, and I would tell a story in the chapter about a patient I'd seen, and then that had that problem, and then kind of describe the problem, describe it in conventional terms, describe it in how we address it integratively, and then most especially discuss how mushrooms, cannabis, herbs, diet, and lifestyle can impact and improve that condition. Some chronic conditions we can't really cure. They're kind of part of the animal's DNA, so to speak, although I'm using that more metaphorically, not necessarily genetic. Chronic disease isn't necessarily genetic. But we can manage them, and we can, just like we can, in many cases, we can turn cancer into a chronic disease, which is managed. We can keep the symptoms on the down low. And, the whole point of life, is to live as long and as well as you can. And longevity has taken new meaning within this pet space, because our pets don't live long enough. So the conversation regarding longevity has become very dominant. And when we talk about longevity, we're not talking about how long the animal lives. We're not talking about the Guinness Book of Records. What we're talking about is the health span. How long is that animal going to be healthy? And so I'm hopeful that for the many pet parents out there, that this book can provide some guidance. And it's also like a text that can be used. I'm getting ready to start doing my own live platforms. We're going to use that textbook kind of as a guide, and hopefully it will benefit the many animals out there that need some help.
Right on. So amazing stuff. So You've been amongst the other firsts, cannabis. You were one of the first veterinarians to really address the use of cannabis, both CBD and marijuana for
Yes.
pets. But why did you become passionate about medicinal mushrooms, and what inspired you to delve into using them with our pets?
Well, I've had a long-standing relationship with mushrooms through my interest in Chinese medicine, although not as wide a range of mushrooms as I'm currently, engaged in. Primarily the reishi mushroom, the cordyceps mushroom, which were most dominant in many Chinese herbal formulas, and even way back when, back in the 90s, I guess. My first black lab, I fed him black Ganoderma mushrooms and black beans. I thought that there was a nice little color match there. So for me, mushrooms are very much like cannabis. One, they're not as strictly regulated, unless we're talking about psilocybin. So they're much more accessible. You can talk about them more. You can advertise them more, that sort of thing. Advertise your talks more, that sort of thing. But I also, as I learned more about what's in mushrooms, I realized that they actually are in a way better than cannabis, except for what specifically cannabis can treat, because each mushroom in itself has a wide range of active ingredients. And I'm fond of calling them the Swiss Army knife of supplements, because they have so many ingredients and have so many different actions, so many that people will often say, well, I don't see how a mushroom can help with the immune system, and also help with cognition, but the same mushroom could do both. So that was really where my interest in mushrooms grew. And then once I learned about the history of mushrooms, which was that mushrooms, have been part of human civilization and prehistorical humans and early humans and primates, because they are readily harvestable forest edible. Once they learned, they being early hominids, which mushrooms to avoid and which mushrooms to eat, they were very, very readily available. And because mushrooms have not just immune system benefits, but also have benefits to cognition and thought. Many there are theories out there that some of the early hominids and late primates, by eating the mushrooms, it may have actually caused some changes in their brain that opened up areas of intelligence, which then is what caused which was allowed us to create these wonderful civilizations that we now live in. And I'm a little sarcastic about that just because of current events. But so we've had a long history with mushrooms. And in fact, what I thought was really cool was when they found Otzi, the Iceman. And this was a prehistoric guy who was frozen in the French Alps. He was killed by a spear. And so they've been really examining everything on him. They've been doing MRIs to look at his body. And he had on him 2 mushrooms. I mean, even back then. And Otzi, when Otzi lived, it predated the Egyptian pyramids. And it predated, wow. It was the Copper Age, and it predated Stonehenge. I mean, we've been using mushrooms for a long time. And one reason why I think mushrooms are so valuable to animals was that early on, billions and billions of years ago, there was a single-celled ancestor that split off into the animal kingdom and the fungal kingdom. The plant kingdom has stayed separate. And so when we do analyses of the DNA, what we find is that the fungal kingdom and the animal kingdom share about 30% of our DNA. And I think this has an important impact on both the pathogenic nature of many fungal organisms, because fungal infections can be the worst, the hardest to treat. The drugs we use oftentimes are toxic themselves. But not just because of the pathogenicity of mushrooms maybe getting in there because of our common DNA, but the benefits of mushrooms. And even last night we had a live event with a plant pharmacologist and a bunch of experts on our live event with real mushrooms. And even then, the expert that we were talking about was again referring to this special relationship that the animal kingdom has with the fungal kingdom. So that's, those are a couple of reasons why I think that mushrooms are really, really a very special supplement and should be a part of every animal, pet, human's lifestyle. It doesn't mean you have to take lots of them in huge amounts. Even small amounts of mushrooms on a daily basis or every other day can provide huge benefits based on studies that have been performed, epidemiological studies on populations that commonly consume mushrooms. We find that even eating one mushroom a week is enough to convey benefits that are measurable. So yeah, that's why I think
Wow.
mushrooms are pretty damn cool.
That's slick. I mean, and that's like even if you're like, ooh, gross mushrooms, one mushroom a week is doable. And that doesn't have to be anything fancier than the common button mushroom, right?
Well, in fact, that is the common button mushroom that study was done on. The thing that's the most available mushroom out there that can be found, in grocery stores and salad bars, and everything like that. And they've done some more studies where they found even the common button mushroom can have a positive impact on prostate cancer sufferers, breast cancer sufferers, because they have molecules in them that modify the expression of these hormone-based cancers.
I mean, and that's insanity and something we've all taken for granted for years. And now there's all this amazing information on medicinal mushrooms. And in fact, let's talk about that a little bit next in
Okay.
the various types of medicinal mushrooms and some of the unique benefits that each might provide for our pets, for our dogs and cats.
So, okay. So getting back to that concept of the mushroom as the Swiss Army knife, there are certain constituents of the mushroom which have a lot of value for health in animals and humans. And the wall of the mushroom, and actually going back to billions of years ago with the separation of the animal kingdom and the fungal kingdom, the wall of the mushroom contains very sturdy polysaccharides. That one's called chitin, and you may be familiar with chitin if you've had lobster or shrimp or crab, because that hard skeleton, that exoskeleton that we find in the in the mushroom, in the crab or lobster, is made up of chitin, and chitin is actually a precursor to glucosamine. And one of the reasons why I think some people find eating mushrooms yucky is because when you start chewing on them, they get a little slimy. And that slimy nature is actually the chitin. And the chitin gets transformed in our bowel by bowel bacteria into a form of glucosamine that's beneficial to the lining of our bowel to help it be healthier. But the other polysaccharide found in the wall of the mushroom is called a beta glucan. And early on, when the fungal kingdom and the animal kingdom were separate, most of the fungal kingdom wanted to feed on the animal kingdom. That was their disease causing pathogenic nature, and so the animal kingdom had to create defenses to the fungal kingdom. And what it did was it was able to recognize the shape of the outer wall of the fungal cell, which was basically beta glucans. And so when it would encounter that shape, it would muster up whatever primitive immune system, response that it would have. And so this beta glucan, when it comes in a mushroom, it's not pathogenic. We eat the mushroom, and it actually contacts cells in our bowel, in a lining of our gut, and those immune cells recognize that beta glucan, and they still have that prehistoric memory. Beta glucan, we better mobilize our defenses. That's what. But mushrooms aren't toxic or pathogenic. I mean, some mushrooms are toxic, but we're not talking about the toxic mushrooms here. Some mushrooms mushrooms are not pathogenic. So the beta glucans in the mushrooms actually gets our immune system going. And beta glucans have a much wider range of activity. We even find beta glucans active in the bone marrow. If you have, if
Really?
if your pet is on has cancer or something and is getting radiation therapy, or if your pet is getting chemotherapy, which oftentimes will wipe out or reduce the population of cells in the bone marrow, which produce red blood cells or produce white blood cells. Obviously, very important, that those cells thrive. The beta glucans can actually stimulate the stem cells in the bone marrow of the red cell line and the white cell line to produce more. So not only can the beta glucans help mobilize immune system defenses against, let's say, cancer or infectious diseases, it also can help with remediating any toxicity from cancer therapy. So I mean, there's just so many things, and that's just those are just two molecules found in the wall of the mushroom. Once we open that mushroom up, and I have to say that we don't recommend eating very many mushrooms raw. The reason is because they do have such a sturdy fungal cell wall that you're not going to be able to digest much of it, release the goodies, the good stuff that's in it. It's going to pass through. So we do recommend cooking it for the minimum, maybe 15 minutes, but the best way to release the goodies in the mushroom might be in Dr. Ruth Roberts', crock pot diet, because in that crock pot, exposed to that heat, it's going to break down that cell wall very reliably to release the goodies that are in the mushroom to do the benefits. For real mushrooms, what we do commercially when we heat process our mushroom powder, dried, we grow the mushrooms, we dry them, we powder them, and then we subject them to a hot water bath at 90 degrees centigrade, almost boiling, for 2 hours. And we feel that, and based on our analyses, that's sufficient to break everything down so that when you take a real mushrooms extract powder, you're getting everything directly. It increases the bioavailability and the absorbance of all of the ingredient, all of the constituents that are in the mushroom. I mentioned the chitin, I mentioned the beta glucans, but we have more that goes in there. There are things in the mushroom that are called terpenes. And we know about terpenes from cannabis. I used to talk about cannabis terpenes all the time because, that's what you do when you sniff those buds is you smell that fragrance. It's not the CBD. It's not the THC. It's probably a terpene, maybe limonene, if you've heard about like lemon haze or something. These all have limonene terpenes in them. And limonene, you squeeze a lemon, you also smell that terpene. And limonene has an uplifting effect. It's been shown to be helpful for depression. It also has antimicrobial effects. That's one reason we see limonene in cleaning products. Not only does it smell nice, but it actually has antimicrobial properties. But the terpenes that are in mushrooms are much larger than those volatile terpenes in cannabis, so they don't smell, But they not only do they not smell, but when you hot water process them like we do, they also are recovered. They don't blow off from the heat, they just get released. So you get the terpenes as well in that extract. And terpenes have a lot of importance. People think about lion's mane these days. And there's a lot of spin about lion's mane helping with cognition, helping with memory, helping with stress. There's some studies showing early Alzheimer's patients can have the progression of their disease arrested with lion's mane. But we also see in our pets and some of our older critters, and you got an oldster there in your arms there, Ruth.
Yes.
And maybe you're starting to see a little bit of geriatric senility, as we say. Sometimes they can't remember where they are, just like humans, can't find the dog door, can't find the food bowl, things like that. And so what we're finding anecdotally, we don't have a published study yet to support it. And unfortunately, we don't have very many studies in our veterinary species with mushrooms. But anecdotally, we're hearing widely from the pet parent community as well as from veterinarians that we are seeing some benefits in many animals who have this condition when they are given the lion's mane. So that's a terpene. We have other terpenes in reishi, which is the mushroom of immortality, beautiful mushroom. If you can see, let's see, where everything's reversed with StreamYard.
Yep.
You can see behind my head, do you see that
Got
big
it.
disc? That's a beautiful specimen of reishi that comes from our grow in China. Beautiful. And there's even one up just underneath the horse as well. And it's probably one of the best known of all the mushrooms. It's considered the mushroom of immortality, has a huge number of terpenes in it. And some of the terpenes that it has in it, and the other mushroom, which is really not a mushroom, it's a fungal infection of the birch, of the bark of the birch tree, is chaga. They both have terpenes in them that stabilize mast cell membranes. And by mast cells are the immune cells in our system that when we have an allergic reaction, they get stimulated to release these histamine compounds. And that's where when you have the symptoms of allergies, they're most commonly caused by the histamines. So although these aren't antihistamines, they're not drugs, they work in a very natural way to reduce that, to settle that down. And the good thing is that the terpenes never come alone. They come along with these beta glucans, which kind of delivers a 1-2 punch, because the terpenes also have a benefit with immune cells, as you can see, but so do the beta glucans. The beta glucans help to stabilize your immune system. You know, when you have allergies, your immune system is a little bit out of whack. It's reacting to things that really aren't dangerous, but it acts like they are mortal threats. And so the beta glucans help to re-educate the immune system and retrain the immune system to not be as vigilant for things that really aren't risky to them, like, you know, pollen or food, you know, or food materials or whatever, you know, mites or whatever it is, dust mites or whatever it is that the animal is allergic to. So that I think that's sort of answering your question. There's more ingredients too, but then we start getting more technical, and I think maybe maybe at this point we might want to go into talking about conditions, or if there's a bunch of questions. I love answering questions.
Right on. So there's and what I did want to say too is Hayo, this little girl in my lap, is notoriously difficult to get to eat strange things. But the functional feline, she thinks is an awesome thing. Strangely, she was not going for daily dog, but functional feline, she is all over. So this is a really awesome new formula. Yeah.
We removed the seaweed from the functional feline because we were concerned about hyperthyroid cats. So maybe she's not a seaweed dog, you know.
I don't know, but she thinks this is pretty delicious.
And just as a kind of a side note, the daily dog was so popular that we've actually gotten back ordered on it because we've had some problems with our manufacturer as well. We have a lot of the functional feline, and basically you can use the functional feline for your dogs until we get the daily dog together, which is a little different, but they're really quite similar. They have 7 mushrooms in them, which are all quite potent.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful formula, beautiful blend.
It has active probiotic cultures in it too that are yeast derived, so they're shelf stable.
Right on. So Saccharomyces is a beautiful way to help re-nourish and plow, I guess, prepare the soil, so to speak, to receive a better, healthier microbiome.
Well, you know, awesome. As I'm talking about all these constituents of the mushroom, and you know, and we're breaking them down with our hot water extract, the mushroom fiber, you know, which is the beta glucans, the chitin, and many other types of non-digestible carbohydrates that are mainly polysaccharides, provide amazing food for the bacteria and other microorganisms that grow in the bowel. So they feed the microbiome, you know, in addition to help regulating it with the beta glucan. So it's mushrooms really are great.
They're truly amazing, really symbionts, I guess, to some degree. I mean, because we're so genetically compatible with them.
Well, you know, and we even have fungal organisms in our microbiome as well. I mean, so we have everything in there: protozoa, bacteria, fungal organisms, some primitive
bacteriophage, viruses, all that stuff. We just think of it as bacteria, but that's not it at all, is it?
It's just easy to say bacteria versus everything.
Yeah. True enough. So there's a lot of, there are tons and tons and tons of mushroom products out there, and there's
which is
you know,
good.
and
I'm
so
glad to see there's so much interest in the marketplace, you know?
right
Mhm.
on, right on. So that is a good thing. But there's a lot of discussion about what is the best way to present them, to add them to your pet's diet. So that would be a fun topic.
Well, I think adding them to the food is probably the easiest way to go. And mushrooms are food. They're superfood. You know, many of the mushrooms are actually prized edible mushrooms. Look at shiitake or the button mushroom, as we mentioned. Shiitakes, I love shiitake. It's so delicious. And there's more, there's as much research on shiitake as there is on garlic and ginseng, which is a ton on both. So, um, so putting it in the food is works just fine. And if it's a powder, you can mix the powder into food. If it's a liquid, you can mix the liquid in the food, although you certainly could administer the liquid directly by mouth if that were more convenient. You know, if your four-legged friend, you know, has a serious condition, you know, like cancer or something like that, it might be better to administer it only in a small amount of food before meals, just to ensure that the animal gets it, because we've got a critical condition we're trying to treat. But in most cases, it's really not important. And the important thing about mushrooms, giving mushrooms, is that you give them, and that you give them regularly. You know, they're really best if you give them every day. There's no tolerance developed by mushrooms. There's really no need to take a break, you know, or to rotate the mushrooms because you develop tolerance to them. Rotating the mushrooms is not a bad idea in terms of just, you know, exposing your animal to other mushrooms which have different kinds of beta glucans and different types of terpenes and different types of actives. But if you have a serious condition for which one mushroom has been shown in studies, not studies in animals, unfortunately, but studies in humans or laboratory animals, you know, then it might be just smart just to stick with that one. Um, and you know, I think the important thing is not just how to give it, but you know, how much to give. And I think that's something that is on the top of every pet parent's mind. You know, Real Mushrooms has a brilliant customer service department that's available 24/7, and we chart. You know, we chart the types of questions that we get, and 60% of our questions are about how much to give or about the word dosage, which I don't really think the word dosage is appropriate for mushrooms because they really are functional foods. You know, plus when we talk about dosage, it implies that the mushroom is actually a medicine, because we tend to dose medicines. We tend to give food, or have portions for food, and we have to be careful with the FDA that we don't make medical claims. And so I've been getting away from using the word dosage, and instead just seeing, the amount, administration guidance, or, how much to give. Nonetheless, when you just are giving the mushroom because your animal's healthy and they're young, you just want to keep them that way. You want to protect them from possible contagious diseases, or maybe you want to improve immune system response to vaccinations, so you don't have to vaccinate so much because you can titer then if they've got a good response. You give a low dose, a smaller amount, and so on the packaging now, we've changed the dosing recommendations to be that kind of lower dose, that lowest possible administration amount or tier there. And then when you get into more complicated problems, like let's say you have allergies and you want to have something that has enough terpenes in it to stabilize those mast cell membranes, or let's say you've got a sundowner dog, you want them to be able to find the dog door, then we use more, maybe twice as much more of that than you might give from the base amount that's recommended on the label, and they're very safe. It's safe at any speed. There's, the amount that is toxic is so huge that no animal would ever accept that voluntarily. You'd have to, tube it down them. And then when you have a serious condition such as cancer, or maybe some infections. Like we're getting a lot of questions these days from our friends in Arizona about coccidioidomycosis, which is a fungal disease found there in the Sonoran Desert that you just inhale it and affects the lungs. You want to use a really high amount for that. See, I say dosage too. I'm guilty of that.
It's hard to retrain. It's hard to retrain, isn't it?
So you would use a large amount then as well, which might even be twice as much as you were giving the moderate amount, for the, for sundowners or allergies or things like that. So I think the best place when you're giving something to your animal is to start at the low end and maybe even lower than what. And I can't speak to other companies' products and how they handle their recommendations for dosing, but for real mushrooms, I recommend starting even lower than what we recommend on the label as a way of making sure that your animal isn't one of those few that might have a reaction to something new that's given to them, outside of their regular diet. And more dogs these days are getting fed these very diverse diets, and so they're much less sensitive than those dogs that were raised on kibble and only fed kibble, and you're just trying to add a mushroom to it. So your dog may be very adaptable, and you may be able to skip this step. I think it's a wise idea to start a little low, get your animal used to it for a week, check the stool, make sure they're not vomiting, see how their appetite is, and then after a week you could increase it to the label dosage, and if you think you need to give more than that, then I'd give that label dosage for a week, again, trying to get the animal acclimated to this new material that's in their system. And in some cases, mushrooms have so much fiber can actually precipitate, defecation. And oftentimes it speeds up the rate of the transit of the stool through the bowel, which doesn't give it enough time to reabsorb water because the fiber kind of moves things along more rapidly. So the stool comes out kind of soft, or depending on the animal, maybe even in a diarrhea. So we want to avoid that if at all possible. It is a possible side effect. It doesn't mean toxicity. I think it's just a normal function, really, of the fiber or of an unusually sensitive digestive system. So then after that, then you can escalate it further, and you can take that label dosage, you can double it, and that's getting you close into the area of double or triple it to get into that area for moderate problems. And then if it were a more serious problem, I would kind of do a stepwise approach to increasing the dosage, even though the clock may be ticking, you're very concerned and very urgently want to get this on board. If your animal has a reaction to it, then you're going to have to back off and stop giving it and wait until the animal recovers before you can give it, even if you even can. So I think caution up front will reward you with dividends later on, as far as being able to escalate dosage to be effective for whatever the condition is you're addressing, and without any issues. And no need to call.
And that's the thing too. When our pets are that sick, we want it all to happen really fast, but they're already frail. So if we try to put too much supplement at one go, we can actually make them sick, which is not cool.
And I would like to interject here, if I may. I know that an awful lot of pet parents come to this particular style of medicine, style of helping their pets, because they've had bad experiences with conventional medicine. But I don't think that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, especially if, as Ruth just mentioned, the disease is pretty serious and progressing, and we were anxious to get something on board. It might be, if that's the case, it might be appropriate to go back and look at some conventional approaches to help downsize that problem, so that the mushrooms, and while we're then getting the mushrooms started, mushrooms have shown themselves to not have really very few, if any, drug or herb interactions, except maybe with anticoagulant therapy. So you don't have to really worry about that. But there are times where I think conventional medicine is appropriate, and I just wanted to speak out for that.
I agree with you. And in fact, in practice, I used a combination of conventional medicine, often using, especially for cancer, metronomic chemotherapies
Yeah.
and prednisone, because we could make that animal feel so much better while
Mhm.
we gave the herbs and the supplements time to do their work. And I think that's, like we both said at the beginning of this talk, our main goal is to make sure that your pet's health span is as high as possible
Exactly.
so that they feel great almost all of their lives. I mean, for my patients, my goal was they feel amazing, 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 and they fall off the cliff and die. I mean, to me, that's a life well lived and
I hope
very
that's
little suffering.
I hope we all experience that, you know?
That's my goal, is to wake up dead,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
dying in your sleep was probably the best case scenario, isn't it? If
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we've got a couple of questions. So
Sure.
Kahu is asking about her kitties. She wants to start
Mhm.
giving mushrooms to her cats that are 2 and 4,
Mhm.
and she is dealing with mostly immunity issues and atopic dermatitis. So, and
Yes.
that's pretty young. Those kitties, poor
Although we
kitties.
do oftentimes see, atopy happen early on, you know? So, the first part of that question, I would think that, in general, before I saw that there were actual problems,
Sadly,
and
yes.
but I would say, I think the functional felines probably are a really good place to begin with that for immunity. And there could be some benefits as well with atopic dermatitis. Now, with atopic dermatitis, I don't think you can expect a mushroom to be the only thing that's going to treat that. You need to find out what the cause is. Is it something that's environmental? Is it something that is food based? What exactly is it? And you need to take the appropriate steps for that. I have found, and the studies recommend that for atopic dermatitis in a cat, one of the better treatments for it is not a mushroom. Well, I'm not saying don't use a mushroom. I'm going to give you a couple of things. There's a CBD like material that's naturally occurring in the body that pet parents are now waking up to, in part thanks to Dr. Judy and the work that she's done with that with her cavaliers, and it's called palmitoyl ethanolamide, which is a mouthful. We call it PEA. And I have PEA on my website, and it's in a variety of places. I think you may have a product on yours as well. And that PEA, after it's being given, and it's very palatable, after it's given for a month or two, the studies show it really helps to reduce and downsize that experience. Now, if you want to get that antihistamine-like effect that I was mentioning, then looking at the reishi mushroom individually or the chaga mushroom individually, but we have both of those already in the functional feline. Maybe not at levels that are high enough to interact with the mast cells to reduce the histamine release, but you can always scale up the functional feline to give even more. And but if not, then I would look at the Five Defenders mushroom extract that Real Mushrooms makes, which has the reishi and the chaga in larger amounts. The question is the palatability of that. And so the functional feline having the krill meal in it, having a nutritional yeast, is very acceptable. And so if you can get them started on that and kind of escalate that, that may be really all you need. And that may be really all you need as far as improving immunity as well.
Right on. And then one of my favorite things to use for allergies to help with symptom relief is quercetin and stinging nettles.
Yes,
And so
very
I
good.
found that to be a super
Mhm.
benefit in
You have a product
combination
on your Do you have a product
with
in your store that has all of that together?
yeah, it's called Histopause
Oh,
because I
sweet.
like puns. Yeah, but
Mhm.
it's been super, super successful in helping to reduce the itchies and relieve some of the symptomatology without using any medications. But I think this in combination with
The mushroom.
Five Defenders and Tremella is another one I'm really liking.
Tremella, the value of tremella is in part that it has a hydration factor. So
Yes.
and especially if you're in certain parts of the country, like where I am in Colorado, which is way dry. But dryness of the skin and can be secondary also to some of the symptoms of a atopy, and so the tremella can help with that. And fortunately for the cat, tremella is extremely bland. It does have a nice level of beta glucans as well. So yeah, tremella could be another partner in this process. I did not put the tremella in the functional feline. There's 7 mushrooms in there, which would be the 5 from the 5 defenders, and then the cordyceps, which I think is the quintessential perfect mushroom for cats because of its protection of the kidneys. And then it has more lion's mane. It has lion's mane as well. So yeah, so those are some answers. Now there was an early part of the question. I don't know if we want to get into that or not, about where they are grown, and I'm
Yes.
curious, kind of what the considerations are regarding the area they're grown, because mushrooms do a very good job of being potent no matter where they're grown. We do concern ourselves with what we call in plants phytoremediation, which is that mushrooms like this, if they're grown by a roadside, if you're picking wild mushrooms by a roadside, they may be absorbing toxins from car exhausts and fumes or from some other location like that. But other than that, I think that the really important part is not where they're grown, but how they're processed, and if there's been any measurement of their potency. Measuring the potency is a really important way to know what's in there and to know how much to use and whether it is potent enough for your critter. Real Mushrooms does a lot of third-party lab testing to ensure that our mushrooms are all free of contaminants. We do grow our mushrooms in areas that are free from pollution, and we also grow them in areas where, and to give full transparency, Real Mushrooms mushrooms are grown in China, and we're very proud of that fact. We know there's current geopolitical issues with China. We've been growing them there for 40 years, and China grows the 90% of all the world's mushrooms. They've got thousands of years of experience in the growing mushrooms, and so we went there 40 years ago to get the best quality mushrooms there are. And so our mushrooms are also grown in areas that would be local to where those mushrooms actually were found naturally in China. Our reishi grows in China in the same area where reishi is found in the greatest amount. So that means the soil, the environmental conditions are all very conducive for the growth of the reishi.
Right on. And Jen's got a really interesting question. And I think you mentioned this earlier, that there is synergy between mushrooms and CBD.
Oh, good
So
question.
how is there a specific timing that you'd be concerned
There-
about?
Yeah, there's studies in four four different species: horses, humans, rats, and dogs, that show that if you give CBD with some fatty food, that it has about 5 to 10 times better absorption. So you would want to give the mushroom, the CBD, just before you fed. I recommend the CBD, if the dosage is critical for the CBD, that you put it in a little bit of fatty food. Now, with dogs, the quintessential fatty food is canned cat food. So that way they get that whole dose, a little bit of canned cat food, they get their CBD, and then you give them their meal with the mushrooms in it, and that will give you the optimal absorption for both types of supplements.
Right on. And then are there any situations where it may not be advisable to combine these two for pets, and how to navigate those safety concerns?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. CBD has shown itself to be extremely safe. The only interactions that I know of between those two are very positive. Oftentimes, between their the terpenes. I think the terpenes in the CBD is and the terpenes in the mushrooms, kind of work together. There some of the same membrane receptors, like let's say in the brain, because we know CBD can affect calmness. Are the same CBD receptors, like the serotonin receptor, that mushrooms will signal, even though they're much larger terpenes. So no, I think you can pretty much use them very safely. That's one reason I put the two together in my soft chews, because I think it's a good way to get them both. And the dog study showed that if you have the CBD in a soft chew, the soft chew serves as the food, and you get the same kind of equivalent superior absorption as you might if you added it to the food, as compared to giving it sublingually.
Interesting. Really interesting.
Mhm.
Here's another interesting question. Any studies on impact on thyroid levels when taking mushroom supplements? So I'm not sure if this is regarding hyper or hypothyroidism.
That's a good question. And in fact, last night we had a live event where we had a plant pharmacologist as our guest, and then we had myself and our medical herbalist Lee Carroll and Mason Brissett, our naturopathic physician, discussing this. And we were discussing adaptogens, because mushrooms can be two mushrooms, reishi and cordyceps, are adaptogens, and we were talking about the relationship between adaptogens and adrenal function. But I brought up that very same question. I said, what about the relationship between adaptogens and thyroid function? So we all agreed it's an area of great interest, and that there is some impact, but we didn't really discuss any studies. I haven't seen any studies. They would probably be, in humans, and thyroid, dynamics in humans are a little different than thyroid dynamics in dogs, and certainly different than thyroid dynamics in cats.
In cats,
So,
exactly so.
But that is something I'm intending, when I can get a spare moment, to do some searches on the literature to see what I can find, because I do think that there probably is a benefit. And if you were looking at improving thyroid function, I would look at the cordyceps mushroom.
Interesting. And is that because of its anti-inflammatory
No,
properties,
because
or why in specific?
it's an adaptogen.
Adaptogens.
And
Okay, makes sense.
because it contributes, because some of the constituents in it contribute to the energy production, performance, and stamina, which are also byproducts of a normal thyroid function.
Sweet. Doc, this has been a ball. I'm going to put in another shameless plug, if I can turn this around straight. If you have not gotten this book, I'm going to drop a link to Amazon where you can go purchase it. Go check this out. If you are interested in using medicinal mushrooms, and as you said, there's a great deal of information on cannabis products in this book as well. Amazing book. It's a life work. I think you've done yourself proud.
Thank you.
Thank you much. And thank you again for your time. You are incredibly busy right now, getting the word out, helping pet parents learn more about how to use these amazing fungi to support their pets' health, and then, by the way, apply that to themselves, hopefully. Thanks for all the work you do, and look forward to catching up with you at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
And thanks much. And for all the rest of you, we will see you next week, and with another cool and fun, exciting topic. Thanks.
Great. I like the work you do, Ruth.
Thanks much.